Hi, Rick here, Rick's Custom Cycle. Today we're going to be doing an install of our plug-and-play air shifter kit on a 2021 Harley-Davidson Street Glide. This is all the stuff that comes in the kit. Plug-and-play wiring harness for the kill. Plug-and-play harness for the compressor. Kill module. Shifter and solenoid mounting bracket. Airline. Air T. Isolated air compressor and mount with automatic pressure switch. Stainless steel air tank. Air cylinder and shift solenoid. Heim joint if you still have a factory shift shaft. All right, let's get into the install. This is roughly the tools you're going to need to do the job. 3/8 ratchet and extension, 1/4 inch Allen to remove the starter bolts, 5/32 Allen, 3/16 Allen, some wire snips, magnet, various size wrenches, 7/16, 1/2 inch, the same with 1/4 inch sockets, and a 10mm to disconnect your battery. The tape will come in later and you'll need Loctite on some of the fasteners. First off, you're going to pull your saddlebags, which we've already done. Next, you're going to remove your seat, pop the bolt out. After you remove the seat, you're going to pull the side cover off, just held in by 3 rubber grommets. Next, we're going to pull the gas tank off and disconnect this vent line. Unplug your fuel pump, pull the gas tank vent, pull out these 4 bolts. We've already removed 2 of them. Into the front. The fuel line. And she's ready to go. All right, next we're going to pull out the ECU and the battery cover. This is not bolted down because this bike normally has a max ECU on it. It's our test dummy. So we'll move the stock ECU off to the side. Normally you'll take out these 2 bolts, but they're already out. Pull the tray off, expose the battery, which we've already disconnected. You're going to want to disconnect yours. Next, we're going to pull the body control module plastic cage out. You're going to run some wiring and some airline behind this. It doesn't have to be completely removed, but take the 2 bolts out that hold it in so you can slide it out. Like so. And next we're going to pull the starter bolts. These are 1/4 inch Allen. If you got a ball socket, it's pretty easy. If not, it's a little bit of a chore from the other side. All right, next we're going to install the shifter mounting bracket to the starter. It's easiest to leave the front bolt out of it, put the back bolt in, position it on the starter, push the bolt in, and then stick your front bolt in. All right, we're going to tighten these bolts down to factory specs. All right, next we're going to put the Heim joint on the shift shaft. You'll need a 7/16 wrench for this. And a 1/2 inch wrench to break the nut loose. And you can spin the joint off. Now we're going to install the supplied Heim joint with the kit. Again, if you have a aftermarket shift shaft, you already have one of these most likely, and you won't need this with your kit. Adjust it to where your shifter is where you want it. Snug the nut down. Make sure the Heim joint is straight up and down. And then we're going to bolt it. to the shift arm with the supplied bolt. Which is a 3/16 Allen. You won't need Loctite on this because it uses a lock nut on the far side. Snug it down. And you're ready for your cylinder install. It's going to come assembled like this, so everything's going to be in position. You will need some medium strength Loctite on this bolt for the install, which is going to be this one here. Slide the heim joint on the end of the bolt. Easier said than done. Pull the cylinder into position. Get the bolt started by hand. Grab your 5/32 Allen driver and run it in. Snug it down. And you're going to install the lock nut on the back, which is going to need a 1/2 inch wrench to tighten that down. It's way easier to shift the bike back into second gear as you're tightening it. Just hold the shift lever. Careful of the cooling fins. You cut your fingers. All right. Well, at this point, you're going to want to put your bike on a pancake jack or a motorcycle jack, whatever you have, and make sure that the wheel rolls freely. And you're going to shift the bike into first gear, full lock. Turn the wheel, make sure it's all the way in gear. Hold the lever. Wiggle this back and forth and make sure it moves easily. Put it back into neutral. Shift second gear. Make sure it's fully locked in second gear. And once again, wiggle this back and forth and make sure that it moves easily. This will ensure that there's no impingements and that the bike can shift fully first all the way down to second all the way through sixth without any binding. All right, next, after you have all that mounted, you're going to feed the solenoid harness through and come up above your factory wiring harness and let it drape out the frame. At this time, you're also going to run the air line through that same hole. Push it in to the fitting, just a push lock, push it in, it's good to go. I've already cut these lines to length. We're going to install the T in this direction because the air line is going to run across the back of the frame and down the frame to the compressor. Again, above the factory harness on the inside. All right, next we're going to run the air line for the air tank. Stay behind your fuel pump plug. Plug your air line in to the side of the T, like so. Again, just a push lock. Feed it through the frame right above the ABS module. If you don't have an ABS module, lucky you, you got a lot of room. Pull it out and just let it hang for now. Next, we're going to install the air tank on the right rear of the bike. You will not need Loctite with these bolts as they have lock nuts on them. It's kind of a tight fit in there, so what you want to do is get your bolts in first. And then pull out your antenna plug. Okay, once you've had that in place and your antenna plug removed, this is where the tape comes in. You're going to tape the nut to a wrench. stick it down through the antenna hole to get to the bolt. If you want, obviously you can remove the rear fender strut. It's a lot of extra work for just these two bolts. This goes pretty easy. Get the bottom bolt in. Don't tighten it up. And again, stick the top nut. Get it in place. You can tighten that one down. Then go back to the bottom nut. Tighten it down as well. And your air tank is now installed. All right, it's time to run the air line to the air tank. You want to come through the back of the frame hole here, right behind the ABS module. Don't pay any attention to this vacuum line here. This is for the max ECU. You're going to come up between the frame and the fender, which is right here. Come up along the strut. Some bikes have harnesses down the side here, some don't. It's easiest to zip tie the air line after you've gotten it into place. Give yourself some extra length. So you want about a nice arc to the back of it. Cut your air line. Again, push lock. Put a zip tie on here. If there's a wiring harness here, you can zip tie it to the wiring harness as well. Don't pull it particularly tight because you can kink the air line. Just put it on there so the air line doesn't fall. Like so. And the cable will actually come with sheathing that slides over this airline to protect it from anything chafing against it, which I'm not using in this video. And once your battery tray is back in place, this line will stay underneath the frame, as will that one, and everything will be nice and clean. All right, next we're going to be installing the air compressor and pressure switch. Mounts to the left side rear strut. For those of you that still have an antenna on your bike, a lot of race guys are going to use this, which are the bikes are going to be bare bones. This antenna bracket and all that stuff will be gone. But for those of you that do have a radio still, you can leave it there. You have to remove this little elbow from the end of the antenna wire, and you're going to need to bend this bracket up by hand before you unbolt this from the strut to give the compressor room to sit, because it sits right in behind there. Again, you won't need Loctite. You're going to have lock nuts. This is probably the toughest part of the job, is getting this thing mounted. Since we're going to have the antenna on there, we're going to use the factory top bolt. So you only use one of these bolts. And what we're going to do is loosen the antenna bracket, pull the bolt out, and slide the air compressor in behind the bracket strut. It's going to be between the antenna bracket and the strut. Look in, get your holes aligned, and then you can start your factory bolt back in there for your antenna. Just leaving it loose right now because you still got to get the bottom one in. So we're going to install the bottom. And again, you can take this skirt off the fender if you want, or the strut off. It's a lot of extra work for the amount of time that you're going to need to get in here. This is where a magnet comes in handy. Stick a magnet in there, put your washer on. And then as far as the lock nut goes, you can do the same thing. And then use your 7/16 to spin the bolt after you get the nut in place. It's definitely not easy to get in there. Get it started, just hold it on there with your finger and get the bolt started. You can come in from underneath with the wrench. Well, maybe not. All right, so we'll go in this way with the wrench. You can tighten this bolt all the way down. And then tighten your antenna bolt. If you look, your antenna wire wraps just around the top of the compressor there. And then the plug will go right here where the harness will come in. And you can zip tie it to the existing harness that's there, or the loops if they're open on your bike. Next, you're going to install the air line off your T up here at the front. Again, just a push lock. Slide that down above the body control module. Careful not to kink the hose. And it's going to tuck in right back behind the body control module. And then it'll go behind the shock. If you still got factory shocks, you can just slide it up above the reservoir. If not, that reservoir won't even be there. Slide it up along the wiring harness. This one I've already cut the length, so again, you'll just push it in the fitting. And then we'll put some zip ties on it to hold it to the harness. Actually, we're going to wait on that because we still got to run the electrical back, so we'll zip tie all that together. All right, next we're going to install the compressor harness. So what you're going to do is just lay your harness up in here. You're going to take your Deutsch connector end, feed it through along with the air line right above the body control module, and the same thing underneath the frame above the shock reservoir, in between the fender and then to the back. Plug it in at this point. We're going to put some zip ties on those. All right, next we're going to install the main kill harness. This is where the blue tape comes in handy. Tape all your connectors to the end lines. That way when you're pulling it through the hole of the frame, nothing gets caught up, and you can kind of pull everything through into position and then untape it. Makes it a lot easier. So you start from the back. You're going to go through the same hole you did for your air line and your cylinder. Feed the harness through. There's not a whole lot of room down here, so these injector plugs are fairly large. So just be mindful that you don't yank on anything or rip any wires out. Pull it through until the relay and everything is pretty much right in the battery tray area. I'm going to come in behind the spark plug wire, between the frame and the wire. And that's kind of where everything's going to lay. Obviously, stuff needs to be zip tied, but this is where you untape your connectors. So we're going to hook both fuel injectors. We're going to interrupt those with the kill box. So you have pigtails for each one of those. And then you're going to have 2 wires that run down to your horn, because you're going to use your factory horn as a shifter activation. There's a switch that will swap your horn to the shifter, and then vice versa when you're not using the shifter, so you still have your horn. Be mindful when you're plugging these into the injectors. Here's the rear cylinder plug, the black one. You're going to want to plug that one into the white and the red. And on the pigtails that go to the injectors, make sure you use the same color, the white and the red. Otherwise, you're going to get a cross injector fire, and the bike's not going to run properly and probably have a check engine light. Snake that in there, right below the knock sensor harness. Get that on the injector. Make sure you hear a click. Unplug the front injector. Push, you'll hear a click. And that one in front of the horn wire. Push it down until you hear it click. Your horn wires. You're going to disconnect the front wire lead on the horn, which is going to be red with a black tracer. That's your power wire for activation. The kill module is specific, and it takes it's set up for 12 volt signal, so that'll all come set up. Basically, you're just going to interrupt the horn wire, and you can run this wire down the same factory location and just zip tie it to the factory harness. Plug the spade connector onto the bottom of the horn and the male spade into the horn wire itself. Zip tie up your wires to trace the factory horn wire harness. Just make sure you have no wires rubbing on sharp metal edges like cooling fins or the horn bracket. There is wire sheathing on this stuff, but over time, these bikes do see a lot of vibration. So be mindful of where your wires are placed. And then tie it to the factory harness up top. The injector plugs, you just kind of got to tuck them in the center above the fuel rail. The shift harness is going to run behind the spark plug wire. And at this time, you're going to run the compressor harness plug or switch down the same path through the same hole. And then you're going to zip tie these harnesses together and up out of the way loosely to the compression release wires and the spark plug wire zip tie that goes up into the frame. Tuck it up in there nice and neat. Again, you don't have to crank the zip ties down, just snug them. Zip tie to the compression release harness. Zip tie all these together now that you have both harnesses run. Be mindful to keep it tucked in next to this spark plug wire because the fuel tank does actually go in right to that point, so you don't have a whole lot of room for stuff in there. So this is kind of going to tuck in behind. Kit will be supplied with a handful of zip ties for you. So you're going to want to zip tie these two harnesses together. Again, not super tight. Just kind of loom them along each other and keep them clean. And then you're going to go above the fuel tank boss and zip tie to your air temp sensor wire, or if you want to go up to your main harness, depending on what bike you have. This wire might not be here. And this is where we're going to stop the install on this, because this particular bike is actually not getting an air shifter installed on it. So normally you would have these 3 open spots. If you have a Street Glide, Electric Glide I think uses some of these spots, but you can, at this time, you can pull this out if you take the dash off, and you can drill holes in here, which is going to be a 1/4 inch hole to mount these switches, or you can drill 2 1/4 inch holes off to the side here to mount the switches, or in the face of the panel, or depending on if you have a Road King or a Road Glide, you can mount these switches wherever you'd like. All right, next we're gonna mount the shift kill and plug in all the solenoid and the relays and everything. This particular wire lead from the solenoid is extra long on this install. This will be cut a lot shorter for your bike, so it'll be right where it needs to be to plug in to this plug here. So never mind the extra wire. Plug those in. We're going to install the kill plug into place, which has got to go down below the main harness and come out between the body control module casing and the frame. Once again, be mindful not to pull on these plugs and rip connectors out. There's protective sheathing on the wire itself, so you're going to want to tuck that down right there. And at this time you can put the module casing back in place, and you'll see that the plugs and harnesses are going to come through right there. And this is going to go on here with Velcro. These two will plug in right on top of the body control module. Push the excess wire a little bit that there is back in the hole. At this time you can put your bolts back in. Be mindful that none of your wires are pinched, none of your air lines are pinched in here. Make sure that the box pushes back into place flush to the frame without any effort. That way you know that nothing's pinched behind it. And you can thread your bolts back in. Snug them down. And now we'll get some Velcro on the module, get it mounted in place. We got the Velcro on the back of the box. Stick the adjoining side to it. Peel off the clear backing. Use an alcohol swab or a rag or Windex or whatever to clean this plastic to make sure that there's no dust and dirt on it. That way the Velcro sticks fine. And then you're gonna lay the harness on top like so. Push it down firmly. Do not push on the screen of the module. Push it down and wiggle it back and forth. And that'll get you to where you need to be. And then your side cover will slide on right over that. Now that all your components are in place, it's time to hook up the power leads to the relays. You can link these two relays together by popping the relay off, sliding it on. They lock together, put your relay back on. Hook up the jumper wire. These are separate because some people buy the air compressor harness and the air compressor separate, and at that point this plug would just come with a flying lead on the end of it instead of a connector. So basically it's pretty simple from here. You have two grounds to hook up, two positives to hook up. They're both fused. So at any time, none of your electronics for the shifter work, the first thing you would want to do is check these fuses. For the shift module, you have a 5 amp fuse, which it doesn't really draw any power. Compressor draws a little more power, so you got a 15 amp fuse in that. Just your standard car fuse. So at this point, you're gonna wanna get all your wires tucked in nice, your air lines tucked in nice. I'm not gonna put zip ties on all this stuff because I'm just taking it right back off, but you can zip tie all this stuff up nice. Once you get your battery connections on, put these on top of the main power wire for the bike, not underneath. Hold on to the wires as you tighten them down because they're going to want to turn. So you're going to want to face them straight out and get them pretty snug in the same spot that the factory wire comes out. And then the ground wires. This harness we actually made about 3 inches short on the ground harness. So on yours, this will be taken care of, so the wires will be extended and you won't have to worry about this, but it's going to pull the relays pretty close and make it fun to get the box back on. So again, these go on top of the factory ground strap. Make sure your compressor switch is turned off, because if you activate the body control module, move the bike, if the switch is turned on, it will activate the compressor as long as the body control module is awake. Again, get those pretty snug and keep them in line with the factory ground. And so at this point, you're going to want to tie up all these wires and air lines off to the side. Be mindful that nothing is impinged where the plastic cage goes on top of the battery or where the seat sits. So we're going to put our hacked up plastic tray back on. At this time, you're going to want to tuck the air line in into the back of the frame. So when you slide this down, it doesn't push on the air line. Which is a little easier said than done. Again, it's a tight fit in here, so just get everything in position that needs to be. That's as tight as this one's going to fit because it does have an extra piece of foam underneath here. It has nothing to do with the bike itself. It's just for what we had going on. Swing the factory ECU back in position. Once again, this is the wrong tray, so the ECU doesn't clip into this tray like yours does. And on the 20 and older, the ECU is a little different. So it's got 3 plugs and they're sideways, so this wiring fiasco right here won't be in the way. So tuck your fuses down. And like I said, the ground wires are a little short on this one. Other than that, your relays would mount back here. You could move them back and set them down here and then plug in your fuel tank. Again, I'm not going to tie up all these wires. I'm just kind of going to shove them out of the way to show you kind of how things are supposed to be. So you can, if you choose to put Velcro on the back of your relays, you can. If not, you don't have to. And that's pretty much where everything goes. All right, when it comes to mounting your switches, the functionality of the switches, this is a 6-pin switch. So this switch arms your air shifter and swaps the horn button to the shifter as opposed to the horn. So be mindful when mounting this. Test the position without any air in the tank. Actually leave the air line disconnected. That way you're sure not to have air line in the tank. You would take and put this in the horn position, hit the horn button, and your horn should blow, and then you switch it in the other position and you should hear the solenoid click for the shifter and the kill box will activate. At that point, note the position of the switch so you know when you're mounting it which position your shifter is in when active and which position your horn is when active. And then the same thing goes with the air compressor. This is an on-off switch, just a 2-pole. So you're going to want it in the off position. This area right here, you'll see it pulled in a little farther. There's no wire hook to that pin. So that tells me that the switch facing backwards is in the off position. And then I'm going to mount this accordingly. So if I want my switch to be mounted like that, that way when I flip it on, it turns the air compressor on. And if you're going to use this shifter, make sure that you have your compressor turned on because the bike will not shift properly as the air pressure gets lower. Sometimes stuff leaks down, so the thing will not have pressure in it when you first turn it on. And most of the time when you flip the switch on, if the thing's already full of air, you won't even hear the compressor activate because there's that amount of air in the tank already. All right, at this point, you're ready to put your gas tank back on, get everything plugged in there for starters. That way when you turn the ignition switch on, you don't get a check engine light. You want to test the activation of your compressor, so you make sure that it pumps up to the designated pressure on the switch and shuts off as it's supposed to. All right, we're going to test the air compressor to make sure that everything works as it should and there's no leaks. So we'll turn the key on, flip the switch on. This air compressor is pretty quiet, works very well. They were designed for air ride, so they're a pretty robust unit. It's going to pump up to 140 psi and then shut itself off. And once it gets down to 110 as you're using it, it will turn itself back on and pump back up to 140 and shut itself back off again. Takes a minute to fill that air tank. There's a pretty good volume in it. So once it's full, it doesn't go through a whole lot of air as you go through the shifts, and it functions properly. Listen for any air leaks. If you want to go as far as a sponge with some soapy water on it and go around and put it on the fittings and check for any bubbles to make sure that everything's pushed together right. But usually if you got an air leak, it'll show its head pretty fast by blowing a line off, or you'll hear a hissing, or the compressor will come back on within a few minutes. Now that that's taken care of, we're ready to test the module. The kill module is going to be set up moderately for kill time. It will come with a booklet that you can adjust that at your own risk. We recommend the settings that we do have it set at, but if you have like a Screaming Eagle transmission or a Race Cut trans, you can turn the kill time down, but be very careful and do it in slow increments, because you can be on the verge of being broke over 10 milliseconds. All right, once you have all that stuff set and you check for air leaks and everything's good to go, you're ready to take the bike out for a test ride. The shifter is designed to shift at high RPMs, so shifting down low, it's going to be super clunky. You can do that for testing. I would probably recommend no lower than 3,000 RPMs, just to make sure that the module's killing and everything's doing what it's supposed to before you start taking the thing to 5,000 and 6,000 RPMs to hit the horn button and shift it. If you have any questions during this install or about the functionality of any part on it, do not hesitate to give us a call at 734-762-2077. We're here from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, Eastern Time. Other than that, enjoy your kit.